His tradition. What happens if you do touch a woman, you lose or not lose your wudu? That means there's a place for it. If they talk about that if you touch a woman, this happens.
Well, because people do it, and you find it in a lot of cultures, even Muslim cultures, like Morocco is a good example. It's an urf there. Doesn't mean it's permissible, but it does happen. It's very common, and there's not a there's no sexuality involved in it or anything, but it's a barrier that the Sharia has put there between males and females.
From what I recall, I believe there is a narration hadith riwayah about the severity of the punishment of someone who does touch ajnabi.
Well, you have to get into what's intention and things like that. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And yeah, there are some strong hadiths, but again, you just, I don't know, there's something that one of my shaykhs called Fiqh al-Waqi', which is the jurisprudence of reality, and recognize that there's a lot of people that are just, it's part, within this culture, there's situations where people find themselves in, where things are compromised. It's not in any way saying it's right or correct or things like that, but these are situations that need to be remedied, and the way that they're remedied is through education, information. That is the way they're remedied.
But in that immediate situation, wouldn't that be considered compelling circumstances?
Well, I don't know. I can't give a fatwa about that. I mean, I just can't. I don't know. I couldn't.
What's a good way of explaining it to someone who does?
Well, what I told my wife is that you need to explain, that it's it's both ways. It's not just coming. It's not the man. It's not that the woman's bad, because this is what the women. Because it's like, oh, this confirms all my fears of. Because she'll go to the woman, the Muslim woman, and she'll shake her hand. But then she goes to the man, he won't shake her hand. So she's like, this is exactly what I read in Newsweek. It's true. There really are like this, So it becomes this kind of confirmation for some preconceived prejudices and biases, right? And we're dealing with a lot. You're not coming to a table where, oh, I don't know anything about your religion. Let's see what it's like to spend time with a Muslim. No, it's, oh, Muslim. Yeah, I've read about you people. And then it's going to start, the littlest things are going to be interpreted as confirming that very thing. He didn't shake my hand. You see, they don't like women. Right? No, seriously, this is the way people think. And it's odd, because another thing is like, in the idea of not looking at the women, which a lot of Muslim men do that, of not giving eye contact, which in this culture that means you're ignoring me. Or generally for a woman it's going to be, he didn't give me any acknowledgement, right? I mean, is that the way a woman's going to perceive that?
People interpret it as disrespect.
Disrespect, and also oftentimes dishonesty, right? You're dealing with cultural interpretations. For instance, in Latino culture, for a woman to look at a younger woman to look at a man's eyes is seen as almost like a flirtation, or that there is. In traditional Latino culture, it's disencouraged for a woman. They will oftentimes avert their glance from men. So, you're dealing with cultural sensitivities. But for the Americans, if you look me in the eye, give me a firm handshake, right? An American wants that. He doesn't want this kind of limp hand. No, he wants a firm handshake. And when you talk to me in the eye. Right? Because he wants to feel you're being honest with him. But if he sees you kind of looking away or something, what's he hiding? Really, that's the way. So you're dealing with cultural norms. And they're very powerful. And, I don't know, I've read, in some 80% of communication is nonverbal. Wallahu ta'ala alam. A good percentage of it is. I don't know if it's that high, but a good percent of communication is nonverbal. And you have to be aware of who you're talking to and what sign language means. Because from children, a cultural sign language is being learned. And you can't just discard it. That's why they have whole courses on cultural sensitivity. They have people that come into corporations and teach managers who are working with Indians, for instance, right? Or because Indians have a completely different relationship to hierarchical structures than in the Indian subcontinent. You don't challenge your boss. Simple as that, right? I mean, you do not. The boss is always right, right? Whereas in America, oftentimes the manager will expect that you give him quote unquote feedback. You go to the university and they pass out a thing to you evaluate your professor, right? I mean, in the East, like in the Arab world or in Pakistan, the student evaluate the teacher? I mean, that would be seen as the height of disrespect, right? So you're dealing with very different cultural norms. And li ta'arafu, Allah created us so that we come to know one another. It's not necessarily that the norms in this country are wrong, but they are related to the culture, right? They're related to the culture. And so Muslims coming here have to, in a sense, recognize that. And there is a type of arrogance in coming to a place and just imposing your rules, if they're cultural. If they're Sharia, no, you have to establish your position. But if they're cultural, there's a type of arrogance in coming into a culture and not being willing to recognize that I need to learn about these people so that I don't offend them when I talk to them, so that I don't, right? I mean, that's on us to learn that. What's appropriate, what's inappropriate. Because different cultures have different things. You go to Saudi Arabia, for you to point your feet at somebody, it's disrespect. In Mauritania, it's not at all. In Syria or places like that, if you're in a class and you're not completely up and attentive, you're showing gross disrespect to the teacher. And same in Japan or Asia. If you're in Africa, it's not the case. So you have different. What's that?
Africa is unique in that sense.
Africa is very laid back. Africa is, I like Africa. It's just kind of they're very relaxed and they're not uptight, and they really aren't. West Africans are very relaxed. And I personally, I feel much more comfortable with that. And part of it is, I was telling I was playing ball with my children in the living room, throwing it off the wall. And my wife came in and she said, "Did your parents let you do that?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Did they let you just play in the living room like that?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What about you?" She said, "No, that was off limits. The living room was off limits." And I said, "Well, there you have really struck at the core of the reason why the Americans are ruling the world, because they think they can play wherever they want. There's just no rules, right?" So that you're dealing with a lot of variables, and the challenge for us is to really kind of maintain to the best of our ability. Attaqullah mastata'tum. Have taqwa of Allah, as much as you're able to. What's that, Isma? What?
Didn't you say that one of the 5 categories, things about fiqh that you talked about yesterday, wasn't one of them had to do with cultural norms?
Norms. Al-urf muhkam. Al-'ada muhkama. Yes, a norm is binding. In other words, and a norm is, in the Maliki madhab in particular, norms are honored. The cultural norms of a people are honored. Islam does not want to uproot cultures. It doesn't want to turn everybody into Arabs. That is not the intention behind Sharia.
But that's after Sharia. Or is that if there's a
conflict, then the Sharia is rules. But if there's no conflict, then the urf of a people is honored,